We'll do it. Do your new intro.
I am doing the new intro because we're live now, Mark. It's Wednesday at 3 o'clock. You know what that means? It's time to roll for combat. That's every week it's something new.
Wait, that wasn't that different. That was almost the same. You just didn't say it with as much scorn as you usually do.
You gotta explore the space and find out what
I'm exploring the space. Every week, I'm like Murphy Brown's assistant. Every week it's different. No one knows what I'm talking about.
Too. So topical.
It's a bunch of KOLC fans in the chat.
KOLC fans. There we go. We got all 21 people. They're all KOLC.
Well, that's how you know it's KOLC.
that's how I know that we're doing great because no one's watching. Anyhow.
Good stuff there.
Good stuff.
So today we're here to talk about the Shadowdark Dungeon Design Contest, and Steven's going to tell you how it's going to work, and we'll give you some tips once we get past that, because you may play Shadowdark, maybe you don't, but either way, you may or may not have designed lots of dungeons in Shadowdark, but you know who has? Michael Putlak, who's on the show. So we're going to give you some tips about Shadowdark dungeon design. It might be different than dungeons you've designed in other RPGs.
Yeah, by the way, who is Michael? I mean, we all know who I am. I know Mark is. Derek is like some loser at Knights of Last
Steven,
Call.
didn't you say that this could be anyone's first episode of the show, so we should always introduce everyone to give that information?
I'm Steven Glicker, the publisher and owner of Roll for Combat, and we generally publish books for 5e and Pathfinder. Actually, I think we're the only publisher that publishes books for both, because I was doing an audit yesterday with some people.
There's several others, but usually most of those others are like, we're doing 5e first, but then if we get enough, maybe we'll do a Pathfinder conversion.
Let me rephrase that. We're the only ones to do every single one of our books for both 5e and
they guarantee that they're going to be in both.
Yeah.
I believe that may be true. But it might not. There may be some small company that only has done a few and did both for everything.
And then we are now expanding into Shadowdark, and I've been working both with Kelsey and with Michael on this for almost a year. Like, this is actually not like something we just did quickly. This has been going on for quite a while.
I believe I can guarantee we're the only company, once we've put out those three, that has done the same product in 5e, well, with differences, adjusting, making sure that they native and they feel right for that game, but have put out some things with related content in 5e, Pathfinder, and Shadowdark. No one else has done that.
No one's done that. No one's that crazy.
Only you are, Steven. Wow. That's great. So I'm Mark Seifter. I'm the director of game design. When Steven, the publisher, has an outrageous idea, as the director of game design, it's my job to make that idea, shape it into something that we can put on to the schedule and get done.
Who's Derek?
Unimportant.
Oh, wow. Unimportant. That is so Derek. Everyone loves you.
I make nothing, and I talk a lot. That's who I am.
Yeah, but we're working towards you making stuff.
Yeah, maybe someday. I got to learn InDesign first. It's,
God, InDesign is so easy. I can help you.
Says the fucking 30-year veteran over here.
Actually,
I've been using it since 0.5 alpha.
That is true. I've been using it since 88.
Having used InCopy now, which does not even have all the features of InDesign for over a decade, I can tell you it is not just some simple thing that you can learn so easily. Right. It's full of features you don't need. However,
that's what I told
once you learn the things that you actually need, it won't be that hard. But it is very intimidating because it's got all these menus and other things full of stuff you'll never, ever need, and that make it hard to find the things that you do need.
Never.
Right. To be fair, you also just described almost every single TTRPG book.
And every single piece of software ever in existence.
But not Shadowdark, right?
That's
there.
True. Shadowdark is lean and mean. You need every word, every sentence, every letter.
I can attest that 80% of that book is Oracle tables that you may never actually need. So, like, I don't know if that's an exact number, but it's a lot of tables.
There's also a lot of magic items and monsters, to be fair. Like, the parts that you need are in the front, but they are very concise, and they don't really have a lot of stuff that you're not going to need.
Now, this is actually a tangent, but far be it from me to not bring us onto a tangent.
Maybe get to Michael.
Yes. Sorry. I don't want to interrupt anybody's interruption.
Come on. I'm Michael Pudlack. I have my own little small publisher called Night Noon Games. I also work with Kelsey at the Arcane Library. I do a lot of the logistics for her. Right now, my big thing is helping to work with the printers to get everything from the Western Reaches Kickstarter printed once Kelsey is done writing it, and also organizing 6 different 3PLs, third-party logistics companies around the world to fulfill those once everything's up and running. And we're also in the nascent stages of putting together Shadow League, which will be our organized play program that we hope to launch in the spring. That's
actually cool. That is actually really
awesome.
Cool. Yeah. That'll be huge at the convention scenes for sure.
You have 6 fulfillment houses?
Yeah.
Oh my God, we got to talk. I got one.
I mean, you're small time, buddy.
Obviously, I was just like, I didn't even know there were.
Kelsey can't see you from on top of her ivory tower.
Jesus.
We just can't, with the tariff, not just the tariffs, but just, shipping anything from the U.S. to Australia or from the U.S. to Europe is just such a pain. And we're making that easier for people, not just for this campaign fulfillment, but we plan on having them all operating on an ongoing basis too, which we feel like will help get Shadowdark's tendrils out in the world a little bit easier. So when someone just orders a random copy off our website, it's not going to cost them, $25 to ship it to Belgium or whatever. Yeah,
very cool.
Very interesting to find out more about that.
So speaking of publishing, and you all have much more experience with me than this. So obviously I'm dipping my toe into the kiddie pool. And the first thing, and of course I'm an Adobe guy through and through, both good and bad. I get it. I pay whatever it is for the creative whatever cloud. But everybody immediately was jumping down my throat. Fuck Adobe, you got to use Affinity. You got to use Affinity. You got to use Affinity. So I posit to the people who know better than me. Affinity or InDesign?
InDesign.
Uh-oh, Michael.
I use Affinity. I like it a lot.
Fight.
I think the issue just is that Affinity is still so new, and so many people current in the industry and in any industry are still using Adobe products that it's hard to collaborate unless everyone's using the same software. So I would say if you're going to be if you're going to be working with a lot of collaborators, they probably use Affinity or they probably use InDesign. So you might want to touch base with them. And if you're just going to start from scratch, you might want to learn that first. If you're just going to be doing your own thing and you're not going to have a ton of, sending those files back and forth with people, then, InDesign's or Affinity's much, much less expensive. And, I like not supporting Adobe personally.
There you go.
So I'll break your tie. I'm someone who has only used in-copy Adobe related stuff. There's no question that you should use Affinity because Adobe, for you, Derek, personally, the person who writes one word in 5 days or something like that, because Adobe is going to charge you $23 a month for InDesign, and you will not get $23 of value out of that.
Right. He already has a subscription service.
Yeah, but I already pay $70 a month for the entire creative suite.
Yep.
So
wait, you got it already?
Yeah, he already has it.
Paid for it. Then
he already paid for it. He already has it.
Okay, you flip my tie-breaking vote to the other side. If you're already paying them for it, then why not use it?
Well, I mean, I'm not paying for them for it specifically. I'm mostly paying that for them for Photoshop, Premiere.
Sure, but they gave you that part of it to you as part of the package that you paid for already. So
it's very expensive and free.
Well, I'll give you a trick. I'll give you a couple tricks. Tricks in trade. First of all, I work with Fortune 500 companies. I work with large companies. I have to use InDesign. It's not even an option because I need to be able to give my files to other people. If you're working with printers, like Affinity is great if you're using it for yourself in small scale. But if you're going to go past that, you have to. It's not a question. You actually have to use InDesign because it's just not going to be supported by anyone else in the larger corporate world. And I found that.
Well, you know me, Stephen. I'm into big corporate, and that's my plan. Yeah. Is I want to get onto the shelves at Target. So
yeah, you got it.
But since I knew that you weren't, Derek, that's why I had initially said that for you Affinity until I learned that you had in design already.
You can get the monthly fee down to $39 or $35 a month. All you need to get is the student discount.
Right.
So
The teacher discount.
if you have any child in kindergarten through graduate school and you submit that they're in it, then you get the discount. So my
loins were not as productive as yours.
Well,
so
I have student discounts on all my software, and it's incredible. Like when they were in kindergarten, I got the discount. And so, yeah, anything I subscribe to, there's always a student discount, and you can get a teacher discount too. And I've also, you can get the discount. I'll leave it at that.
I'm an educator.
You
of
are
people,
an educator.
Right?
You're an educator. Like, it's not that hard to get the discount.
Knights of Last Call about TTRPGs that they would have never seen otherwise.
It's not that hard to get the discount. And to be fair, I use all the other products like you, Derek. Like I'm like it comes with like 50 products, and I use probably a third of them. So it's well worth the money. I mean, it's like, oh, it's like $500 a year. I'm like, yeah, it used to be $1,000 per product per year 25 years ago. So this is a bargain. Let me tell you. I mean, in my opinion, this is as cheap as it can be. So whatever.
Anyways,
anyhow, let's get to this contest. And so a few things. First of all, we are doing a Kickstarter for Shadowdark, and it's going to be coming pretty soon. I've been working on the page, working on the tiers. We've been working on the content. Michael's been working on the content for like 7 months now or something, 7 months. He's been working on it for a long time.
Yeah.
We're going to have all the monsters from Battlezoo Bestiary 1, 2, and 3. We're going to have new classes. We're going to have the monster part system where you can kill any monster, doesn't matter, any monster, and turn into cool gear in Shadowdark. And we'll have a couple of other cool surprises in there. We're going to add some more cool content, very Shadowdarky. And you can sign up now at shadowdark.rollforcombat.com. If you put down $1, you'll get these cool Shadowdark dice. If you don't, you can just sign up and just get alerted when things go live and get some updates.
I want to clarify for everyone, just to make it clear, because some people have gotten confused with this in the past. If you put down $1 now as a pre-order, and then you back any tier of the Kickstarter, you will get the dice. You will not get the dice if you put down $1 now and then don't back the product. There have been some people have heard Steven say that and think, oh yeah, then I'll just put down $1 and not back it. Yeah, even though that's it does say in the fine print that. I just want to make sure.
Okay, it's very clear everywhere that yes, you have to. It's a pre-back and you get the cool dice. So that's it. And there's going to be
Kickstarter is going to have a backing before the pre-backing, before the backing.
Oh, well, man, you're already doing that. You know what? That's called Patreon.
No, that's like when they have a trailer for the trailer.
Hey, man, there's nothing wrong with that. It's a good idea.
Coming soon.
The trailer.
People, you know what? That's what this is right now. In fact, if you give me a super chat, that will be the backing before the backing, and I will give you something special if you do a super chat. If you have any questions, feel free. Super chats are always answered. So that's coming out, and there's going to be 3 books. 3 books. And there's going to be Monster Hunt, there's going to be Strange and Unusual, and there's going to be Elemental Storm. And each one has its own theme around it. Monster Hunt is basically monster hunting. And Strange and Unusual just has weird stuff, weird classes, weird monsters. And then Elemental Storm is all elemental based, including the classes and the monsters. And we'll have and there's an elemental system to it. So all 3 books, they all stand alone, but they're all going to work together. So if you want just one, you get one. If you get all 3, you can get all 3. By the way, people have asked me, yes, they're the same size as Shadowdark books. Not only are they the same size as Shadowdark books, but Kelsey uses the same printer that I use, because I told her about it, and she's using it, which is great because they're a great printer. I think like everyone's using them now. And so our books are going to have the exact same printing as the Shadowdark books, literally. Same paper, same binding, same everything. The Shadowdark books that are being made in the same location, so it's going to match 100%. So you don't have to worry about that, because people were very concerned about that. The other thing is it's all black and white. People have spoken. They don't want the color. We're redoing it all in black and white, people. It took a while, but I found some artists that are good and fast. So, because it's like, oh, okay, so we only have to redo 500 pieces of art. Great. But they're doing it. They're actually cranking pretty well. When's the DCC collaboration? Hey man, one at a time, okay? Actually, Goodman has been on, and I actually started my TTRPG. My first professional stuff was through DCC.
Steven, you've shown people.
Yeah,
you pulled it out.
I maybe after we finish the Shadowdark stuff, we do DCC. So one of the things I wanted to do was have a contest, and the contest is going to be, and I'll explain it to you, and we're going to talk about it, is that anyone who backs the Kickstarter, you have to back the Kickstarter. I don't have the full rules, but I'm going to give you the general rules. So the general rules are as follows. First, you got to back the Kickstarter. If you back the Kickstarter, you can then submit a dungeon to the contest. The dungeon is designed in the same way, and I have it here, as a one-page, it's actually a two-page if you flip it, dungeon. They're the same size and scope as the dungeons you can find in Shadowdark that Kelsey designed. And this is actually an example of one of our dungeons. It's not completely done, but this is the Corrupted Temple, and you can see it's very similar to the Shadowdark layout and design. It has, on one side, it has the overview of the dungeon, some random encounters, a little magic item, the actual dungeon itself, and then on the second side is all the encounters themselves. And that's it. That's how these are designed. So it's a very nice one-pager. They're designed good for convention play, good for one-shots. They're really good for convention play. I've actually played a couple of these in conventions. They're great because they're just big enough that you can play them within 4 hours, and they're usually, they're really great for one and dones, and they're a lot of fun. It looks easy, but actually designing a full dungeon on such a small space is really tricky. And we're going to go through some of the tips and tricks in this video.
Was that made in Dungeon Scrawl?
This is made in, what is it? The actual dungeon itself?
I'm the map. I'm just
the map itself.
InDesign. It was InDesign.
Well, I did it in InDesign. I did.
Yeah, Steven did it in InDesign. It was based on some other stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, because it has like the kind of Dyson logo style to it.
Oh no, I did all that.
Oh,
I did
cool.
all that, and it took 2 hours. I tell you, 2 hours. Anyone knows what movie that's from? It actually took like 3 hours. But anyhow, so how is this going to work? Now, I'm going to get the full rules to you when the Kickstarter launches, but it's very simple. We're going to give you some pre-made dungeons, okay? I'll give you an example.
For the maps. You'll get maps.
We're going to give you some pre-made maps, and here's an example. Whoops, that's not the right one. I messed up. There we go. So that will be like one of the pre-made maps. So we're going to give you... We're still figuring out the number, 10 to 20 pre-made dungeon maps. So you'll get pre-made maps, and you can go through. There's going to be a form, and on the form, it's going to be very tight. There's going to be word requirements and word limits for all aspects of the dungeon. Now, if you want to ever publish professionally, you better get used to it because there's always word counts. So there's always going to be word counts. There's always going to be the minimum, the maximum, and all that fun jazz. So we're going to have, for example, whoops, I keep doing this because now you're doing this weird. The title at the top will have a word count. The description of will have a word count. It's just a maximum. There's going to be a minimum too, but a maximum as well. Then sort of the description of the actual bad guy, if you want to include a random encounter table. So all these areas are going to actually have a word count. And then for the back page, there'll be a word count as well. And then they'll have a certain number of rooms you can include, more or less within somewhere like 8 to 12-ish rooms. You don't have to all do the exact same rooms, but you do have to use the same dungeons. And we're going to give you pre-made ones. So we're going to give you a whole bunch of pre-made dungeons. You can select which one, and then you can go through and sort of build it out. And then you submit it. The people who judge it, well, it'll be me. It'll be Mark. I imagine Michael will help out. Maybe even we'll finagle some Derek in there because Derek
You do not want me judging your dungeon.
Oh, we do want you because he's
Well-
rough. He's rough.
So, Steven, I think that we either need to get Derek for all or nothing.
Oh, he'll be all or
Because
nothing.
if he judges only half, those half will have a much lower average score
I know,
than the half
I
that
know.
wasn't judged by Derek.
Yeah, we'll see how many
But we can
get
also,
in.
if he doesn't, we can normalize it and be like, well, these
Yeah.
people didn't have Derek, so we'll auto adjust their scores down.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. We'll say, oh, okay. I actually have, because we do.
We
Derek
normalize
whatever.
things
Yeah.
before.
Well, because we do the
when-
Monster Master contest, I have a lot of experience in these contests and like averaging scores and all that.
Yeah, we've had some judges who were just like, I love everything, and others who were just like, this seemed like it was off by like one number. How dare it be extreme in all caps?
And here's the best part.
That wasn't me, by the way.
It wasn't not Derek.
Here's the best part. If you win, you get, here's the prizes. You get money. I'm going to publish the dungeon, and we're going to run your dungeon at Origins, at Gen Con, like wherever Roll for Combat runs dungeons. You'll have your dungeon run publicly. How about that? Pretty cool. So
Pretty sweet.
that is going to be pretty sweet. And there we go.
So we have a super chat.
I
for
already
$10 from-
know where that's. I don't even need to read it. I already know what it says. What does it say?
It's from Kane Baal Publishing that says, so if we already have some made with a map, we can't send those in for submission?
No. And the reason is, if anyone knows publishing and the way it works, is the number one the number one issue, the number one difficulty, the number one pain point for adventures. On a scale of 1 to 10, I will rank this as 20 billion is the maps, okay? Dealing with maps and dealing with other people's maps and then having them drawn, and it's very, very, very difficult. And these are literally professionals whose entire job is to create maps, create adventures, and submit them, and they're still very tricky. It's actually quite a huge pain point.
I've heard a lot of horror stories about maps.
It's
My favorite
It's bad.
map snafu, because you usually think about it as being like it's too bad or the style is off, was one time because Linda uses like a pretty nice map program to do her sketches to submit. She submitted a map to Paizo for an adventure, and it was so good that they accidentally thought that it was like the cartographer's finished map and not the submitted sketch. But it was not a program that you can like legally publish the map from that you were using, right? It's not like for publication. So they realized like shortly before the product was due, but with just enough time, barely, to order a rush map. Wait a minute, this was not done by a cartographer. It was just done like in this map program. So
Yeah.
like that's just one of many horror stories you can hear about maps. Maps are rough.
maps are
I
rough.
think one of the roughest things about maps is that we often the people who have to generate the maps aren't paid for the labor of generating maps. They're only paid per word, regardless of how many maps you ask for. It's just like they're a whole thing. So being given the maps will also sort of Iron Chef style test your creativity to use what you've been given. You'll also get a subset of the monsters from the books early. So those are
forgot
like the
that.
secret ingredient. You have to use what you've been given, and that will show off your creativity in with the restrictions that breed creativity.
Yeah, and this is a contest, and we want to make everyone using kind of the same ingredients and the same rules. So you'll be given pre-made maps. We're going to give you subsets of the monsters from all 3 books. So you'll be able to use all the monsters from one book. You can't cross the stream. So if you want to submit monsters, if you want to submit a map using just the monsters from Monster Hunt, you can do that. If you want to use it just for Elemental Storm, you could do that. And you can also use any of the monsters from Shadowdark core rules, just the core
Yes.
rules.
But if
So
you
any
only
of them.
use the Shadowdark core rules monsters and none of the monsters from our book,
Well, that's
we're
part
not,
of the rules. You have to use some of our
we're
monsters.
not going to be.
Yep.
Like, you want to make sure you're finding a cool combination of them. The one Steven showed up there, the Corrupted Temple, had many of the basic undead from the Shadowdark core rules, but also it really highlighted some of the Battlezoo monsters from Elemental Storm as well.
Yeah, you can see like here we have like cunning guests, mournful ghosts, hungry ghouls, wandering skeletons. I mean, those are your standard.
Those are all from Shadowdark,
But
and
then
then
if you
there's
go
like the
here-
Vigil Flame Lantern and things like that that
Right,
are from
you go to ours, you can see
Elemental
we have
Storm.
like a Spirit Flame Lantern. That's from Elemental Storm. We have the Cesspit Serpents, Vigil Flames, but Shadow Thief, Burlap Sack. Well, that's just a sack. But some of the monsters. So it's a mixture. It's a mixture of both new and old. It's also good because it keeps people on their toes, because then they can't actually know exactly what is coming, because they won't be able to, use out of game knowledge. As for what makes maps so tricky, what's the trickiest part is that people draw maps differently, and everyone's maps, we have to go through, we have to look at them, we have to figure out the scaling, we have to figure out what's a door, what's not, and then we have to take your map and give it to a cartographer. So it's really a question of, we get the maps, words are words, text is text,
Right.
Maps are just every way, shape, and form you can imagine. We get them.
Even this map on screen, right, is a great example of, like, for example, this is using what I call the SSI style of doors. So that's like the old gold box games and Eye of the Beholder and stuff like that, and Dungeon Hack, and is the door is occupying a square.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of people draw it where they would draw it on the border between two squares. And so, like, just having those little minor differences in the way that some people, use their cartography could be very, very confusing. I interpret a star inside of a circle as a statue, but other people might mean it's a pentacle, so, like, everybody uses, so now you're talking about having to have, like, a key, and you're just going to spend a lot of time trying to translate everything. It's just going to be a real mess.
Yeah. And someone's asking, I mean, does it take out some of the creativity? Look, we're going to give you a lot of maps. Okay. We're going to probably give you at least 20
When Steven
maps.
says between 10 and 20, I think it's going to be 20.
It's going to be 20.
It might even be more than 20.
It might even be
10 is
more.
not enough maps for this
No, we're
contest,
gonna give you
so
a
I don't think we're
lot.
going to give you 10.
We're going to give you a lot. And I'll probably even give you variations of the maps. Here, I'll give you an example. Like, so this map here, I'll give you an example. Hold on, I got to find where this window is open. Here we go. So I can actually change the level of water. So I can put the water on and off. So I can actually change the water level so that it is everywhere from really high to really low. So that I can even include maps with and without water. We can have it that some of these are secret doors if you want to change the secret door layout, things like that. But in terms of the maps themselves, hey man, it's a contest, and there are going to be some parameters. It's not a everyone submit anything they want contest. It is, here's the ingredients, put them together, show us your creativity. It also makes us a little easier for us to judge, because we are judging like versus like. We're not judging everything in the entire universe versus everything. And to be honest, we've done enough of these contests that I know that it gets crazy. It's very hard.
We also
to
know
do
that for sure that these maps are the correct size to fit, like, even if you told people to make maps like a certain size for the picture, they could draw it really small or really big, and you won't necessarily have it at the right size. So you then can't, in case they draw it small or big, give a specific size for the picture, in which case you might wind up with one that's like long and thin and it doesn't fit the layout, or just overall too big.
So how will we spot AI entries? There's a couple of things. First of all, I'm pretty good at detecting AI. Derek's very good at detecting AI.
I do all right.
Yeah, we're pretty good. The other thing is we have enough parameters and enough in here that it's going to be hard for you to make a coherent map using AI. I'll leave it at that.
And especially since you have to use the ingredients that we asked for. If you were able to do whatever you wanted without using any of our ingredients, maybe you could get AI to write something and then you quickly like draw a map that sort of like fulfills that. But I think we're going to be able to tell more easily because of the parts that we're requiring.
I mean, I don't even think we have to worry about detecting AI, because I think that AI just regresses everything to the mean. And if someone submitted an AI dungeon to us, it wouldn't win, because it would just be meh.
Right.
Yeah.
And then I'll be brutal. And that means if you lose to AI, what does that really say about you?
Yeah. I mean, that, yeah. I mean, we're also going to have to, if you win, we do pay you, we do get the rights to it, but you do get published. So, and there's going to be the clause in there saying that you did this and you did it originally and you didn't use AI. So there are going to be some legality to it. That's why I don't have the final rules. And so you have to attest and swear that you did it yourself. Now, can you use AI to help generate ideas? Of course.
Nobody can tell if you did that.
Yeah, well, that's just
if you're like,
generating
I want to do a
ideas.
dungeon idea,
That's
AI,
fine.
tell me some other things,
Exactly.
and then the AI was like, it could be a forest with wolves or
Yeah.
something. Like, no one's gonna know that you did that.
That's not what we're looking
that's
for.
People's pre-writing process.
Right.
But if the AI writes it for you, I think we're gonna be able to tell.
Correct.
Now there is a question in another super chat from Cannibal Publishing that says, are we limited how many entries we can submit?
Yes, we'll probably do 3, and we'll probably do 1 per book. That's usually what we normally do. So you can submit 1 for Monster Hunt, 1 for Elemental Storm, and 1 for Stranger Than Usual. So this way you can...
Would that be 3 for the tiers that buy all 3 books and 1 for the tier that buy 1 book, or 3 for everybody?
Everyone.
Because I know in the past we've sometimes had a different number of submissions at different tiers.
To be honest, for those of you who know Roll for Combat and know our crazy tier system that we usually have 5 million.
It's going to be
tiers.
less crazy this time because it's all in one game
we got 5
system.
tiers, and that's it. There's only 5 tiers, and they're all really simple. In fact, I will tell you what the tiers are. Are you ready? This is the tiers. You can buy all the PDFs. You can buy 1 hardcover book. It includes the hardcover book, includes the dungeons and the pre-gens. So it's going to have everything you need to run that book. Might be some stretch goals, but we'll get into that later. You can buy all the hardcover books, or you can buy all the hardcover books, special editions with a slipcase. Very similar to the ones, ours are a little different, but very similar to the ones that Shadowdark uses and Kelsey. It's going to look very similar. In fact, ours looks just like this. It's going to look very similar to this. The gold version that no one else has except me and Mike, that you'll be able to get. So it's going to be very similar. It's going to feel like
I'm going to get one from Kelsey just so that
I can
I'll figure out a way just so that I can just stop that.
Mine is my retirement fund.
Michael has one too, right? Mike, you have one.
Mine's still wrapped in plastic.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
That's going on in 20 years.
Hey, we have our copy, which is signed by Kelsey, informing us that we were playing her game wrong. So that's worth its weight in gold.
That was pretty funny too.
Steven, that was only 4 tiers that you just described.
We're probably
Are there only 4 tiers?
Well, no, we'll probably have 1 more tier, which people seem to like, which will probably be a super top tier, which you'll get all the deluxe and you'll be able to add a monster to the book, which people like. I'm thinking about that one.
In the past, when we've done contests, what we did with that one is that your contest entry was guaranteed as well.
So this one I just want to do monsters because people like monsters, and we have room for them, and I actually do like adding new people's monsters to the books. So, and it's also pretty easy compared to, say, a full dungeon. So I'm still fooling around with that tier, but it's just an idea. But I think it's been successful in the past when we've done stuff like that. But when are you
guys going to launch? When are you thinking?
Pretty soon. I mean, what I was going to do, well, it was supposed to be this month, but I pushed it back for various reasons. It might be next month, but I might have it pushed and then do it while Gen Con is happening so that we can advertise the Kickstarter throughout Gen Con, because I probably can put up a banner.
A lot of people do that.
Yeah, and we'll put in, like, I can put in cards when everyone buys something. And as Derek knows, how many cards did you hand out at PAX East?
We lost track after, what was it, 5,000 or something?
So it was a lot of cards. So and that was PAX East. Can you imagine how many cards and how much we're going to probably hand out?
As long as it
Gen
starts
Con?
next month, it will be open during Gen Con.
Yes. We're going to have it during Gen Con. It'll probably start. No, it actually have to start in July and then end.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Right.
July
it will start
next month. That's the secret.
You're right. Next
time.
month. Right.
Let me check my calendar, guys. Let me check on these dates.
Why?
To make sure that July comes before August.
Oh, no,
Yeah.
I thought you meant that you're launching. Well, for some reason, I thought it was May. So it was supposed to be May, but I moved it. I was going to do June, but now I'm thinking, well, I'm going to be there. And we got a booth. Like, we didn't have a booth when I first set this up. And we did our PAX East con, and it was really successful. I thought we did a really good job. And we got a lot of foot traffic. So if we get even a percentage of that for this.
So I'm guessing it here. I'm guessing July 8th. I'm just making this number up completely out of the blue.
It'll probably be either July 8th or 15th.
Yeah, that would have been my secondary guess. I just I know Steven, so I just picked a number that seemed like what he would do.
Yeah. Launching Kickstarter is just tricky because, I mean, you kind of have to coordinate. Plus, I have to be around. You know, it's like a combination of like me being here / when it ends, and like there's a lot of coordination for these dates. You don't want to do it too close to a holiday. You know, it's like all this stuff. So, believe it or not, August is not the greatest time to do Kickstarters.
It definitely isn't.
But
Gen Con boost could be a real thing, though.
Yeah, but actually, I've done August Kickstarters and they're fine. So I think Kickstarter's really changed a lot since those days. Like so many of those rules are kind of gone now. Like a lot of those rules don't apply. So
none of the rules apply to you, Steven. You did an all digital Kickstarter, and everyone at Kickstarter themselves are like, "What are you doing?" And then it still did well.
Great. I know. I do a lot of that stuff that's not supposed to do well, but so yeah, it's pretty soon. I mean, I can start it now, but if we did it then, we couldn't go it wouldn't
go until Gen Con.
It wouldn't go through. I think it's helpful to do it through Gen Con, and then if Kelsey, would promote it at all, that'd be nice. I mean, obviously I'm not going to hold her in anything and it's totally up to her, but that would be nice. But we're going to definitely help it. Obviously anything we do will help promote Shadowdark because it's her product. Not that she needs my help, but you'd be surprised because there was a lot of people who, I know it sounds insane, who didn't know what Shadowdark was in the Roll for Combat audience. There was like quite a few.
Well, you mentioned before that the Roll for Combat speciality is Pathfinder 2 and 5e, and while I do view Shadowdark as sort of the olive branch between 5e and old school, it is, those two genres of game are pretty over here in terms of the OSR verse. So yeah, generally speaking, yeah.
Oh, so someone asked what the page count will be. Somewhere between 250 to 300 plus pages per book. So
it's a lot.
Put that into perspective of the Shadowdark book.
Well, the Shadowdark book itself is big, but keep in mind it's the entire rule set and it has everything in it. It's 324 pages.
Okay.
325. Yeah, we could probably get close to that. And it's
a little bit shorter than the full entire Shadowdark rules, and then 3 times.
Yeah.
So 3 of those.
Yep. We ain't fooling around.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, but the Western Reaches, it's 2.
Yeah, it's 2 books.
The Western Reaches is a player's guide and a GM's guide.
Got it.
Those are going to be about the same size, maybe a little bit shorter than the core rules.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the 3 new Curse Scroll
zines. Right. What I'm trying to say is that this time next year, my Shadowdark book will go from 1 to potentially like 6.
Yeah. Well, the point was I wanted to come out with books. Like, I mean, I don't know how to say it. It's like I wanted to come out with a not a serious product, like a actual product of Shadowdark level and quality and size. I didn't want to come out with a zine. I wanted to come out with something that can stand beside Shadowdark and hold its own, and is useful to the Shadowdark community. And on top of that, there's going to be over 500 illustrations in our books. So that's something else that we do that's a little different than some other publishers. Like, we do a lot of art, and you guys have seen, I've been posting the art for Michael and Mark, and
it's cool.
Yeah.
It looks really rad.
Is the digital tiers going to have VTT tokens of the
yes.
monster?
Yep. every tier gets all the tokens for your books. So if you do the $59 tier, you can get all the tokens. Everything will work for VTT. We actually have everything designed specifically for VTTs, and we're probably going to do a Foundry VTT module, because if that's where the Shadowdark community is, and we're already like the second or third largest Foundry publishers on the scene. Like we're like right there. So that's not a problem for us to do Foundry. In fact, this will be pretty simple for us to do Foundry modules for all 3 books. So
did you read their year-end report?
No, actually I did not. What did it say?
Shadowdark, I think, was their 8th highest played game in terms of minutes.
Well, in that case, we're doing Foundry. I'll be adding that to the tiers.
Well, yeah, Shadowdark is doing well on Foundry.
Was number 1 5e or PF2?
PF2, I guarantee it.
On Foundry? No, it was 5e by
oh, was it?
By Country Mile.
No
wow.
way.
Yeah, now that they have 5e. 5e is always going to be...
But I thought 5e with the D&D Beyond and the Roll20,
it
would be
not. They didn't have an approved module. Trust me.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Now that they have an approved module.
Yeah, but it's like, I'm actually still stunned. Well, it doesn't support my sales in any way, shape, or form, because we sell probably 10 Pathfinder modules for every one 5e
Well, no,
module.
but of course, Stephen, that's still that is all consistent, and here's why. Because if you have the same product in both, 10 times as many people from PF2 use Foundry as 5e, but that doesn't mean that the number of games being played isn't much higher in 5e. They just don't buy our products.
Mm-hmm. True. So people are asking, is it going to look and feel? It's going to look exactly. I've already shown it to layout to Kelsey. She's approved it. You know,
it uses the compatibility logos and everything that you're supposed to do for
She approved the
Shadowdark.
compatibility logo. I mean, there's one advantage of being friends with Kelsey is I just could ask her if she approves things. So, yeah, we're making it look. It's going to look very similar, but we're styling it. Like we're going to definitely. We're not ripping off her style exactly. She, is very protective of that. But obviously, she does have, a style, and we're making sure that it looks the same, because we heard very strongly that people want it to look like this. So we're going to make it look like that.
They want it to feel like your Shadowdark book, and that included not having any color art on the inside.
Right. It's going to feel like Shadowdark, but we're going to make it have our own look. And if you look at look at our page, just go to shadowdark.rollforcombat.com. That's a perfect example, because it feels like Shadowdark, it looks like Shadowdark, but it's not Shadowdark. It has our layout, our design.
Speaking of Shadowdark, looks like Kelsey's.
Oh, Kelsey's there.
Oh no. Oh, Kelsey.
We can stop talking shit about her then.
Oh, I said her name and she appeared. Hi, Kelsey.
You said it 3 times, actually.
I said 3 times. It's like Candyman. Hi,
Does
Kelsey.
that make her the devil? Yeah, I was going to say.
She is the devil. She's the devil to me. Hey, Kelsey, you want to come on the show? You come on the show. We can bump Michael.
She says she's packing.
I know. I'm kidding. We would never bump Michael. We'll bump you, Derek.
You would bump me. Yeah. if I am anything, it is bumpable.
It's bumpable. Kelsey. Hi, how you doing? So we're just talking. I'm going to be doing a contest where people will be able to submit for my Kickstarter. I'm just bringing.
Hey, while Kelsey is still in the chat, why don't we have Michael give tips for designing Shadowdark dungeons?
Sure.
And that way, if Kelsey also wants to put things in the chat about tips, there's like, I don't know, Michael, about that tip. We can see some interesting responses. It would be a good time.
Yeah, so one of the things I wanted to talk about, we've been talking a lot, people have been asking questions, but one of the tricks is that, and I want to probably do this more than once, is that designing these dungeons, and let me tell you, just give you some background, we had Linda Zayas Palmer, probably one of the biggest, most prolific dungeon designers ever. Like, she's designed and worked on more dungeons than anyone probably living right now today, and she designed the dungeons for us.
There's a few who've done more.
She's up there in the top. I'll give her the top 3. Okay. She's worked on hundreds, if not thousands of dungeons. Okay. And Michael still had some really good tips for us when we submitted dungeons to Michael, because there's a very
I was actually really happy with where it was before going to Michael. But even then, Michael had dozens of useful tips that are going to make our other dungeons even better. So. we're going to give you some of those dozens of useful tips now.
Yeah. Go, Michael.
Oh, wow. Just like that, huh?
Yes.
Well, when you're dealing with, okay, so first I want to address the everyone getting the same dungeons and why that's a good thing. And I think that kind of goes around into these tips, right?
Okay.
So if you, what's so great about giving everyone like individual dungeons is because like having that, I think, restriction will help people's creativity. I really think that's going to help people like learn, look at this thing and then decide what's going to go into it and how can I make this stand out from everyone else's or from another person that's using the same map. And I think a lot of that ties into sort of idea goes back to Kelsey's dungeon writing methodology, which is, her succinctness, getting to the point and keeping things brief, and then also the information design within them too. And those are all sort of restrictions that Kelsey put on herself. I'm already feeling embarrassed for saying this if she's still listening, but I know that those are restrictions that she put on herself when she was writing this. Those were goals for her for the system. And if someone out there is going to write a Shadowdark dungeon for the first time, it's going to help them realize that, I'm used to writing a paragraph or two for Pathfinder or 5e. And if I had to cut things down, I really can get to the heart of the matter much quicker than I even thought I could. To me, that was something that was really sort of like a weight off my shoulders to realize that, like I can do this. And if I can do it, I think anyone can do it too. And if you look at Kelsey's existing dungeons, there's on the Arcane Library website, there is a pack of like 5 mini dungeons. There's also some free ones that she's written out there. If you join her newsletter, you get some like free dungeons and adventures, and you can kind of study those and look at her something like information design. That was one of the points of feedback that I gave Mark, and please interrupt me if you guys just feel like I'm rambling. But information design of how you order things in the room, is often you're going to say, what would a character see first in this room? And that's probably going to be your first, line or so. And then what are they going to see second? Then that comes later. And then the third line, like, there's a chest in the corner. And then further on, then it's what's inside the chest. Things like that are really going to help you not only keep succinct, but also make it feel more like a Shadowdark dungeon because it follows that same sort of information design and succinctness that Kelsey uses in her own.
I just want to say I love that information design. I just look, you know what? I co-created Pathfinder 2. That doesn't mean I love everything about the way that some of the information is presented. And the Pathfinder/D&D standard of, hey everybody, let's read this box text that's 6 sentences long and doesn't address the elephant in the room. And I mean literally the elephant, because this room has a giant elephant in it. But we're going to tell you about the intricate tiles on the floor beneath the elephant. We're going to tell you about the chandelier that's above the elephant. We're not going to say there's an elephant. Right. That makes me want to pull my hair out. Mark. And I literally tried to get that changed for Pathfinder 2, but it didn't work because people were like, well, what if the elephant wasn't in the room? I really do like having the elephant as the first sentence.
Yeah, so you stole my exact. I did a whole big rant about this when I was talking about like creating descriptions. I was like, please don't talk about the intricacies of the scroll work on the tapestries when there's a gigantic flaming demon that's like standing in the middle of the room. In fact, chances are pretty good that if you're entering this room, you might not notice the intricate scroll work on the tapestries because your eyes are drawn to the flaming demon that's standing 20 feet in front of you. So yeah, I completely agree with that in terms of your design. Because remember,
so you may notice in our Roll for Combat adventures that in some cases we don't have box text, although often we do because Stephen likes box text. But even in those cases, Stephen agreed with me about the information design, and so we violate the D&D and Pathfinder standards, and sometimes it's just flat out put the monster up front, or we let you know that it's there in the box text, which is against the typical standards.
Right, because I've always stood by the fact that a dungeon, map, an adventure, or whatever it is a tool that is designed to help the game master run their game. And, sure, aesthetics are nice, but at the end of the day, form the form has to follow the function. And so, like any tool, if there's a tool in my workshop and it's difficult to use, I'm not going to reach for that tool. So even if it, I'm going to reach for the tool that is easy to use, helps me get the job done. And so as much as I appreciate a certain level of beautification about adventures, and I understand there's even this kind of weird aesthetic now of like, well, most people don't run adventures, they read them, and we have to make them readable instead of making them runnable. And I sort of fundamentally disagree with that, even though I understand that that makes a lot of sense. But that being said, I still think at the end of the day, they should primarily be designed as a tool that you use to run while at the table.
I think a big difference between Pathfinder and 5e adventure and dungeon design versus, DCC or definitely Shadowdark is I think that Pathfinder and 5e don't trust the reader, and I think that's something that they don't trust them to be able to fill in the blanks themselves or to come up with this information. And I think it's like, to a small degree, insulting that they don't think that the DMs can fill in these details, or a big part of Shadowdark writing is using natural language. So they don't think that a DM can read something like, XYZ knocks the player to the ground, and if you're doing something like 5e, you have to be like, oh well, it's that this person is prone and they're afflicted by this condition, where that's a lot less common in Shadowdark because it just relies on the DM to fill in those blanks themselves, and that's part of what makes it more succinct.
Well, anyhow,
I think that like beyond the standard Shadowdark advice about conditions non-existing, and you hope that everybody knows what stupefied means, that there's a further piece of advice for dungeons, which is it's sort of derived from that same one. And it's something that you said, Michael, for us for dungeon design, which is you only include it if it's directly relevant for something that the GM is going to be using.
Mm-hmm.
So if there's something in the room and like, okay, yeah, maybe they could search around and find more clues about like the history of the dungeon, you don't need to put that in there and the GM can figure it out on their own. Yeah. But if there's something where they search the room and there's like a magic item they could find in it if they succeed, or there's some other like direct result that gives you a direct benefit or a negative drawback for failing it, that's when you need to bring it to the GM's attention.
I mean, I think the best example of this is, the players walk into a kitchen. Like, you don't have to say, there's pots and pans, there's knives that like a player could grab and like use it for D4 damage. It's saying, okay, this is a kitchen, and it doesn't have anything about the pots and pans. It doesn't have anything about a stove. It doesn't have anything about an oven in the description, because it's a kitchen. So that lets you, in your design, just describe the things that would be relevant to, in one of the cabinets there is a note hidden, or whatever it is. So that also helps with being succinct, and it also helps just the readability, because a GM, whether they're running the game or just reading it, can they know what a kitchen looks like. And then to your point about Mark, you might not want to, if they want to learn more about the dungeon's history, that's something I think you can put probably in the first, if it's a 2-page dungeon, there's usually a paragraph or 2 paragraphs on that first page. It's like, bang, here's the history, and here's what you need to know. And it's super easy for a GM to just read those 2 paragraphs and know, okay, when they're looking at a mural, what kind of stuff would have it, what kind of history would it tell based on those 2 paragraphs. So.
Right. But you leave it up to the individual GM on those kind of things that, some player might want to know, but that isn't guaranteed that it's going to produce action, that it's going to produce some kind of real consequence for succeeding and for failing the role.
Yeah. That style of, like you said, you just tell people it's a kitchen and then, figure it out from there. I think that's really a great example of sort of like, give a man a fish, you feed him for a day, teach a man to fish, right? You feed him for a lifetime. I think that, asking that sort of relatively light lift of, hey, it's a kitchen, figure it out. is a skill that I think some GMs in the modern era maybe have not developed that muscle as much as maybe they used to back in the day when, you were running Keep on the Borderlands and like the room has it's like a 1-sentence description and then the monster stat block, and it's your job to make that feel like a goblin den and make it feel like a goblin lair. Like, what does that look like? What does that smell like? What's here? When a player asks what look around, instead of reading the description, you have to think. You have to be creative. You have to insert your own sort of unique touch. And I think that's something that I think is really, really neat. And it's actually a conversation we've had before where, going back to Shadowdark, my experience with Shadowdark is more through the lens of like BXD&D. But I've heard a lot of people. I've run Keep on the Borderlands many times, and I've had people, and everyone goes, "Wow, it ran so differently for me." Like our experience was completely different. And even though we were all still hitting those same kind of rough story beats, our game was very different. Whereas a lot of, I think, more of these more cookie cutter type adventures, everybody kind of has the same exact experience over and over and over again because the GMs run them pretty much exactly the same because the recipe is all laid out. So I think that you should leave room in these Shadowdark dungeons for the GMs, to draw maps, leave blanks, as they say in PBTA language. You don't have to feel like you have to specify everything.
Genderland Games just made a good comment too, that you can also have your players fill in those gaps for you as well, which is I think a great exercise for like communal world building, and is a great technique if you're not feeling up to it, or you don't know, or you just want to like get your players into the action too.
You heard it here first, folks. Shadowdark is in fact a narrative collaboration RPG. It's a story RPG.
There you go. And we got affirmation from Kelsey in the chat, who said that it helps the GM also engage creatively with the material, get their ruling reps in, get better and faster at improv, and sing with the mind's eye.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we will probably give these notes and helpful hints for the contest, by the way, because they're good stuff. There's actually, I would say, a couple of main pillars when it comes to design and layout of dungeons. So we're talking actually about some of the technical aspects, which is a big part of it, of like, okay, how does the dungeon work? How do you lay out the rooms? And how do you actually describe what's in the room and do it in a concise area and concise way? And that's a big part of it. But, and trust me, the winning entries will have this as close to final as possible, but that's only part of it because, to be fair, that can be fixed, okay? It's not great. We don't love to do it, but it happens, and we will have to go in and usually edit these, and that's what editors are for, is to put in the correct style and the layout for Shadowdark or Pathfinder, 5e, whatever system you're using. But then the other big part is that you need to have a story and a cohesive narrative to the dungeon. And that's something
a high concept that makes sense and is evocative, because that can't be fixed. Even if you followed all the Shadowdark rule sets, and like, not everything that's in your boring dungeon with a bad concept should be there, and it's in the right place, and it's all things that have consequences, and everything we said for the advice. You can't fix that the dungeon didn't have an interesting hook or concept that was just kind of a mishmash. In fact, that might be what happened because AI wrote your dungeon and it just mishmashed things in there. It didn't have any high concept or vision or story, like Steven said.
Yeah, and especially for these tiny dungeons, you definitely want to have a story to have people have almost like a beginning, middle, and end. And most of these are usually like, when I read The Corrupted Temple, is that let's see, that there's basically foul reeks of death oozes from the walls of a once gleaming temple. Okay, you know where you're going, a temple. The temple's new masters have made no attempts to hide the trail of blood that leads right up to the entrance. And there's a necromancer in there. So, okay, you already know. You're going to this desecrated old temple that necromancer and some evil undead cultists moved in, and you need to go and kill them. There you go. Like, very quickly, within 2 sentences, we gave that all there. And then, when you go into the dungeon, what do you expect? What do you think? Bloody entranceway, desiccated, altered. There's a classroom. There's the Hall of Reflections. There's a prison that's made from one of the storage closets. There's a chapel. There's an unholy font instead of the holy font. There's the Hall of Fallen Angels and then the Hall of Remembrance. So it all has the theme of a temple, as well as the encounters. And eventually, do you find the Archmage Necromancer and kill them? Of course you do. And that's the fun. It's like, it's telling a story, and it helps frame the story by just a few words. And that's really what makes the best dungeons and most memorable dungeons is that.
So this is not a Shadowdark specific tip, but it is a sort of a standard design, which is sometimes known as the 5-beat dungeon, sometimes the 5-room dungeon, but it's not really 5 rooms. So it really confuses people somewhat on that. With the dungeon that has the first beat is an entryway, some kind of guardian that's blocking you. It could be a trap, like in the Mines of Moria. It could be a riddle to get in, something like that gets you in. And Stephen talked about the bloody entryway here. Then you have something that is like some kind of, maybe a puzzle or role-playing challenge or some kind of weird thing that's in your way. That's the second beat. The third is a trick or a setback. The fourth is like there's a climax or a big battle. And the fifth is a reward, revelation, or twist. Now, obviously, most dungeons, you can kind of go through the rooms in a lot of different orders depending on how they're connected to each other. So you need to think about that when you're sort of designing a dungeon with respect to this. Obviously, if there's one entryway, that's going to be the entrance. If there's a boss at the end who has a treasure, that takes care of beats 4 and 5 for you. So you're really just looking for some other stuff in the middle.
Yeah.
I'm excited to see how people take the monsters, because I think this, at least my strategy with this contest, would be to pick my monster first, probably, because you want that to be the highlight of the dungeon. That's probably going to be your big bad, or there's going to be something involved with a monster that you're going to have to deal with at some point. So, if it's a sort of like water monster, maybe that's like a reason to pick a water temple. And if you want that as your theme, that also might influence like the map that you pick as well. So as the person that's been, turning all these monsters into Shadowdark monsters, I'm really excited for seeing the kind of situations that people are going to put them in, and what everyone else's brains are going to do with these things. So
to sign up, just go to shadowdark.rollforcombat.com. It's going to be part of the larger Kickstarter. That's the pre-sign up page. If you want, you can put down $1, and then if you back the Kickstarter, to enter the contest, you actually have to back the Kickstarter. You'll get some free dice. They're Shadowdark style dice. They're black and white. They're really cool looking. You'll get that automatically. As long as you get a physical tier. Actually, you do have to get the physical tier to get the dice. And the actual contest itself will start when we do the Kickstarter, which will probably be in July, probably June or July at the latest. So either this month or next. I guess today's June. I keep thinking it's May, but this month or next, and then that's it. So we'll have, it's coming up pretty quick. As for the levels, that is interesting. Right now, I will probably say for this, we're going to have to confine it to specific levels because
we're targeting mostly 1 to 5.
Mark, you actually took the words. You didn't even let me finish. We're targeting 1 to 5 because otherwise there's too many monsters. I can't give you monsters for every level. So I will give you a subset. Also, quite frankly, it's easier to write and easier to design for. Believe it or not, it's a little easier around 3rd level. 1st level is actually pretty tough, but that'll be up to you. You'll decide on the level. It'll be within a range. What are you gonna say, Derek?
I want to ask Michael a question.
Okay.
Now, remember that Shadowdark, in the tradition of esteemed games, is not necessarily what we would call a combat as sport type game. It's more of a combat as war type thing. Balance and level means it's a little bit more loosey-goosey. But the advice, and I'm curious about this myself, the advice on monster levels is on a 1-to-1 PC level is for levels 0, 1, 2, and 3 is, I think, 1 level per PC. Is that correct? And then at 4, it shoots up to 3 levels per PC.
I haven't actually memorized those exact rules because I just looked them up in my book. And I could do that.
Yeah, it's something like that, Derek. I know what you're talking about because I was looking at it when we were making.
Why don't we ask Kelsey? She's on the line.
Honestly, the reason why I don't have that memorized, because the thing I like to say is balance is a false god.
Sure, I appreciate that, and I would be the first person to say that
balance
it doesn't
is a
matter
false
as much.
god. That's the name of one of the dungeons. I like that.
But it says to put some that are above and some that are below, and not try to put a lot of them all at that range. But that is the typical, like, that's your bellwether, middle of the road.
Right. And I thought it would be in the GM section, but
no, I remember it. It exists. I think it's right in front of the monsters or something like that.
Oh, maybe it's before, because there's a bunch of tables in between.
So, I know
Kelsey said it's a guideline, hard to reduce all this to always correct, but these are rule of thumb. Yeah, they're the rule of thumb. That's sort of the center of the road thing.
Right. So the only reason I bring that up is because there might be some confusing and think, because you might think by the rules, a level 3 party of 4 people, you should use about 4 levels worth of monster, and then a level 4 party would use 12 levels of monster. So you could see that, like, if you're just using a strict accounting perspective, it doesn't quite work out. The other thing to remember too is Shadowdark has what in 5e we would call bounded accuracy, which is to say that even if you're much higher level than a monster, chances are good that your armor class is still totally hittable by that monster. So if you have a lot of monsters, they could still be very dangerous. And even a single high level monster, while being able to maybe splat somebody, these creatures don't have 250 hit points. So even something that's really, really high level might only have like 30 or 40 hit points. So if you try to put like a single big bad into an encounter, if there's 5 or 6 PCs or, with hirelings and henchmen or whatever, what have you, they might just zerg it down from again. Now, some of this doesn't matter as much.
Down. You get a hero point for that, buddy.
So Kelsey confirms that it is in the monster designing section.
Yeah,
and don't follow rote or you'll lose contextual nuance. And yeah, I mean, that's definitely true. When we were first looking at these at Roll for Combat, Steven sent me a few that were from Kelsey, and there were ones where, like, one of the dungeons was higher level, but all of the encounters were weaker than the one that was lower level. And like, they're just guidelines. You don't have to go exactly on that. We're not going to be grading you.
I know. That's what I'm just saying. This is the way, but for people who play 5e and people who are playing Pathfinder 2 especially, they're used to these numbers being these, very hard and fast rules, to the point where, in Pathfinder 2nd edition, if you get a little creative with, I'll just throw a level 8 monster in on this level 3 adventure, it's going to TPK the party.
By the way, so Kelsey actually put up something very interesting. She wrote that swarms are brutal and solo fights will land poorly if not supported a bit. So swarms are definitely brutal, because swarms are either really easy to deal with if you have the right equipment, or impossible to deal with if you don't have the right equipment. Well, usually what I'll do...
By swarms, she doesn't necessarily mean like...
She means swarms of lots and lots of little monsters. She doesn't mean the swarm type.
Oh, you're not talking about the actual swarms? No. I'm talking about,
like, for example,
we do have actual swarms.
If you had a level...
I know what you mean.
If you had a level 4 party and you threw 15 level 0 monsters at them, that would be a really tough fight.
Well, by the way, that's another reason we're giving you pre-made dungeons, because these rooms are not that big, so you can't put in. And
Steven,
yes,
we're not using miniatures here. You believe it or not, a 50 by 50 room can actually fit a lot of people in it.
Easily can if you're not using.
I know, but no, but our rooms aren't 50 by 50. Our rooms are the biggest room I can see, and most of my dungeons are 5 or.
I'm going to have
30 by 30.
I'm going to have a heart attack if those squares aren't 10-foot squares, Stephen.
Yeah, I think it's up to the designer how big those squares are.
Yeah, how about their dungeon, Eric?
You want a bigger dungeon?
Yeah,
10, and if you want
it's cyclopean size, you could say they're 20 by 20.
Yeah,
and be like, this was created by Titans.
I've been brave enough to use a 30-foot square before when I wanted to create a really gigantic dungeon.
Yeah. Which Kelsey had another thing, but we kind of got swept up in Derek's question back when we were talking about writing a good concept. She said, I think you must feel evil delight in what you're writing. It should all have you excited to run. I think that's definitely true. I personally, my motto is like trying to fall in love with whatever I'm designing at the time. So whenever someone asks me, what's your favorite X thing that you've written, I'm always like, it's whatever the most recent one is, because I've hypnotized myself to get into that thing it will
by the way,
be better.
Kelsey wrote, action economy is the killer. That's why mobs are very dangerous and solo creatures are less worrisome. Let me tell you something, Kelsey, who had 100 undead zombies attack me.
But she forgot to take the attack.
And I still lived, because what you do is you run away and you push your other party members forward. They die, you get away. There you go. It's not that hard. It's really
Right, I
not
don't
that
have to.
hard.
I don't have to unround. I don't have to. She's even admitting that.
Yeah, she said
you're-
she forgot to roll the hit. Action
You got
economy
out
is
lucky.
Kill the killer. In this case, the action economy was she forgot to take the actions.
Yep. And you know what? It's not lucky. That's called Glicker luck.
I'm just saying that you do have to recontextualize here that the Shadowdark characters, while very plucky, are not superheroes, and they are not going to be going Dynasty Warriors in full Muso mode, and these aren't the minion rules where you're like, their attacks will bounce off of my AC 27, and there's no way that this creature could even hit me unless they roll a nat 20. Like, that is just not going to be the case, and even a lonely giant rat, if there's enough of them, will kill your level 5 fighter. If enough dice are rolled. So when you're designing these encounters, now that might be fine. Here's a giant room full of rats. How are the PCs going to deal with it? They can't just charge in and kill them and fight them in melee. Oh, but what about the barrels of oil that we saw at the beginning of the dungeon? Okay, let's go get that, and we'll roll them down and light them on fire and create the world's largest Molotov cocktail. And then we're also starving, so let's eat the fried rat. But it's again, you have to sort of, if you're used to D20, if you're used to Pathfinder 2, if you're used to D&D, you do kind of have to, you have less restrictions, but you also have to it can be difficult because there's maybe not as many, guardrails on what you can and can't do.
I'm trying to find, I have my Shadowdark sheets, by the way, Kelsey. So I'm trying to find my sheets from the game that we played, because I saved all that
stuff. So Steven, can we confirm, are we going to give them some examples of dungeons that they can look at in the contest so that they can see what we're talking about rather than just giving them the tips? Like maybe one dungeon example and be like, this is what we mean by these tips that we think exemplifies the tips.
Yeah. Of course,
so you won't have to worry about if you're someone like Derek was talking about, and we know we're going to have some 5e and Pathfinder fans who are trying out Shadowdark for the first time because of this contest and this Kickstarter. So we want to make sure you're supported, whether you are Shadowdark day one and you've got every Shadowdark thing up until this point, you know it all, or you're a Shadowdark newbie. We're going to make sure you're supported. You can still compete in this contest. And if you have a wonderful creative idea and a concept for a dungeon that you can compete on at least a more equal footing, obviously the person Shadowdark day one is going to have some Shadowdark advantage.
So I have a question for Michael.
I don't remember my character name, but here is my character from Kelsey's with my sword of awesomeness, by the way.
So my question for Michael is, even though I very famously do not like them, do you think that the dungeon design principles change if you're thinking about running it as a funnel?
This is a great question, Derek, because I actually haven't written any funnels. And I'm sure you guys are all avid listeners of Between Two Cairns. And last night, this was keeping me up because I was thinking about what makes a good funnel. Yeah. And I actually sent a question into their moot sack about what do you guys think makes a good funnel? Because I think Yohai and Brad are pretty good at this too. And I bet they'll have a good answer. And I'm sorry I don't have a better one for you. But that is definitely... If someone can write a good funnel for this contest, I think that would help them stand out a little bit more. And the reason why I was thinking about this is because I haven't seen any, and I don't think there's any reason why there can't be any higher level funnels. Like, can't there be a level 3 funnel where you're just like,
you make for like a bunch of level 3 characters and you're just running it.
You're just going through the buzzsaw,
that's kind of cool.
Yeah, but
I might actually enjoy that more than the level 0 funnel.
No, definitely. You know what those are called? Those are called Jason Bowman dungeons. That's a level X. Jason Bowman makes these insanely difficult dungeons that are very deadly, and they're not level 1 or level 0. They're level whatever you want them to be, and they're really, really tough. So,
also, I thought of the last reason, by the way, for why it's good that we're pre-making the dungeons. And by the way, let me be very clear about something here. Like, I hold the sacred art of creating a dungeon map to be, I hold it in high esteem. But the other thing is, remember, they got to print these things. And if they have to print like 5 completely different styles, well,
they're not going to be. We would have to restructure your dungeon into
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So they'd have to do all the work to make it all look the same anyways. So
So you said we. So does that mean you're on board, Derek? You said
Well, you told me I was going to be judging at least some or none. So, or all or none.
all
but,
or
you know,
none. You'll want to do it. It's not like you don't have the free time. It's fun too.
Oh, Steven.
He just daggers. This man.
Yeah, he just
daggers.
He just stabbed it.
Hey, Derek, remember how you don't have a job anymore?
You bring it up every 5 minutes on your stream.
Listen, that's on my stream. That's on my time. Okay.
Look, you know what? I get it, Derek. It's the same way that, like,
Daggers.
if I'm reminded of the fact that, like, my collection burned down and I bring it up
You bring it up all the
way too
time.
often, right? That's different than someone else being like, haha.
I actually
your
never
stuff
bring
burned
up
down.
that you lost your collection ever, because that's just mean.
Yeah, exactly. And that I appreciate that, Stephen. But with Derek, you do stab him a little bit.
Derek and I have a loving
A
relationship.
different rapport. It's just
I'll say this. I'll only say this. After PAX, I'm both more in awe and afraid of Mr. Stephen Glicker. Okay, let's just say that.
You're definitely afraid.
I'm definitely afraid.
You saw things that cannot be unseen.
Right. What happens at PAX East stays at PAX East. Let's just say this man is dedicated to getting you your TTRPG products, and neither the laws of God nor men will keep him from delivering.
That is
those
true.
goods.
I broke many a law.
Many a traffic law.
Many. I draw. Woo! That was something. He's still scarred from that. He will never be the same after that.
Well,
day.
I've never participated in a NASCAR race, and now I can say that I have. So,
in a truck, no less.
yeah, in a panel van. So that
panel
was,
van.
Was
The top
anyways,
of that. It was scary.
So I've got another tip for people. I think.
yes.
I think you gotta find a way to play test your dungeon before you submit it.
Yes, that was very, very good tip.
And I think that's a common tip. But my special thing that I will do if I don't have a group to play with in a given time frame is I'll actually roll up a party and play it solo.
That's
and
cool.
I think that can really
That's
give you more
hardcore.
information about the dungeon too and about the adventure. Just using the Shadowdark rules, which are free on the Arcane Library website. Yeah, I mean, by the way, if people are not into Shadowdark who want to submit a dungeon to this contest, I think the only buy-in someone would have to have is to pledge to your guys' campaign, because I think you could make a dungeon just with, the Shadowdark quick start set, which is free, and then, just pledging to you guys, and then looking at some of the existing dungeons out there. Like, I think the barrier to entry for this for people, I think is pretty low, which is exciting.
Yeah, you really actually wouldn't need the Shadowdark rules for much, if anything, because the sample dungeon will show you what the format looks like on some of the checks and things like that. Yeah. And so if you even look at the sample dungeons, you'll see there's not a lot of like rulesy stuff in it. Yes, it includes like the names of monsters that are there, but we're going to give you those monsters so you can know to put them in there. It's like maybe if you didn't have the Shadowdark rules, the base ones, you wouldn't know the base Shadowdark monsters that are allowed to be included. You'd have to use only the selection that we gave.
That's also not true. That's also not true because the under Kelsey's license, people can reprint the Shadowdark monsters verbatim. So, like for instance, and one of the reasons why I got hooked up with Kelsey is I made a tool that's available on the Night Noon Games itch page that is a spreadsheet, and I guess you're familiar with my spreadsheet, guys. That's a spreadsheet of all the Shadowdark monsters from the core rules, and that it has like every single stat like in its own cell, so it makes it really easy to look at a large number of monsters at once to kind of compare them. So if you want to if you need a level 4 monster, you can go to the spreadsheet, check it out, sort by level 4 and be able to compare, oh, this is what level 4 monsters do. This is what they kind of look like. And not to seem like I'm just plugging my own stuff.
No, but is that free on itch.io, that tool?
Yeah. It's
I mean, we could even link it on the contest for people who are trying to find, because we're going to link the ones from our books that we're submitting, that they can get the limited ones. But we are also allowing them to use the base ones from Shadowdark. So if that's a free way that they can quickly look at what are those ones that are from the base Shadowdark, then that's a great possibility for the contest.
So some people who came late are asking, are we gonna what are the rules? How are we gonna do this? Okay, here we go. I'll give you the feedback once again. So very simple. When the Kickstarter goes live, you can pre-sign up now at shadowdark.rollforcombat.com, and you'll be notified when the Kickstarter goes live. You have to pledge to one of the tiers, and then you can enter the contest. And you will get basically a link to where you can submit your dungeons. In the link, there'll also be the full rules with like all the legal details. There'll be the outline of which dungeons you can use in terms of the layouts. There will be the monsters that you can use, which will be a combination of some pre-made monsters as well as from our books, as well as the Shadowdark monsters. And there will be a template that you will use to enter in your dungeon. The template will pretty much just be like a Google Forms template. So it's going to be it's not going to be something, you're not going to upload a Word file or anything like that. You're going to have to type it through. And the reason for that is to make sure that everyone is within word count and using the same layout, the same structure. Word count is extremely important, especially for Shadowdark, because word count is limited, we'll say. And it's very, 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 very easy to go over word count, especially for the Shadowdark dungeons. So you're going to find how quickly you run out of words. And that's part of the contest, is to put a lot of descriptive information in a very small space.
You got to be like me. I'm known for being, for being very, concise and really relying on brevity to get my points across.
Yes. In fact, if you've watched anything from Knights of Last Call, you know that if you want to watch a 4 to 6 hour stream, then you're in the right place.
That's right.
I have the same problem, by the way.
People were saying, they're like, oh my God, Derek's going back to short form content the other day because I only did 2.5 hours. They were like, oh,
believe it or not, yesterday
Derek's doing shorts.
Look, yesterday I turned you on, and then after like 2.5 hours, you were off. I was like, what happened to Derek? He was only off for 2.5 hours, as opposed to 6.
Let me ask you another question, Michael. We've been talking a lot about creatures. What about other elements that you
traps.
think sort of, that kind of, when people think old school, they tend to think, hazards, traps, the puzzles, challenges. How do you think that factors into the Shadowdark experience?
I think traps are critical to most dungeons. And a tip for in the rule books, in the core rules too, I believe there's a section that tells you what kind of traps are appropriate for which levels, and it helps to create traps. But something, and this was a note I think I had in that one of those adventures I looked over, Mark, was that when you're writing these traps, I think it's really important to write the consequences of not making a check when you run into one. So if you have you tripwire and a crossbow shooting at you or whatever, it might be a DC 15 dexterity check in order to dodge it. You don't have to talk about what happens if you successfully dodge it, because that's pretty obvious. You just need to talk about the consequences if you don't dodge it. So and to go back to your original question about the traps, I think traps are important because it helps kind of control the players in some ways, depending on the level of the trap, and it kind of helps reshape the shape of the dungeon. So when people are talking about, why can't we bring our own maps into this? I would encourage those people to get creative with traps, because if you say that one room is full of lava or something like that, then it's going to probably encourage the players to find another way around or find a creative solution to getting across. So I think that's sort of a way they can control the environment, control the environment a little bit more to make that dungeon their own.
Yeah, and I think that
but you know what I mean.
No, I do, and the reason I specifically want to bring up traps is because this is one of my personal philosophies, which is I'm not a big fan of what I'll call untelegraphed or unforeshadowed trap, where the character's just walking down a random corridor, there's no particular reason for it, and then boom, a spear shoots you. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that's really cool about Shadowdark is you don't have the same sort of overbearing skill system. if in Shadowdark, it's very explicit. If you look for a trap, you find it.
Yes.
Right. So you shouldn't. So in theory, if someone's looking around, they're going to find traps. So finding traps isn't about testing the character, the player character, as much as it is about testing the player and using your language and using your description to make people go, this just doesn't feel right. Something's up. You know, I look extra careful at the demon's mouth, and that's when you see the metal nozzle, and you can smell the oily smell and the residue of the flamethrower jet or whatever. Yeah. The player finds it, but the player has to engage. It's not I take 20 on my perception check. It's not I take passive perception. It's engaging with the game, engaging with the environment that allows it. And so traps could be a really cool way to get your players to engage more with things, sort of picking up rocks and seeing what's underneath them. And I think that that's really, really cool. But really, I would recommend avoid just saying you're walking down and the trap hits and you hit, you take 4 or 5 damage and we move on. That's fine, I suppose, but it doesn't have that same kind of fun play pattern that it can create. It's really all about problem solving. And that's what makes, in my opinion, that's what makes games like Shadowdark and old school games in general fun, is it really involves you, the player, as much as it does your PC, because your PC is kind of limited. It doesn't have as many knobs and buttons and whistles as other game systems, more complicated, more complex, more depth, in-depth game systems. So a lot more. And so a lot of people could look at that and go, wow, this game's really boring. Like, where's the cool thing that I can do? And you're right, it doesn't have those knobs, and whistles. So if you're looking for that, you're going to be missing that. So you're like, so what am I supposed to do in this game? And the answer is get involved and ask questions.
So I'm going to flip your topic sentence of that thesis, Derek, and say, rather than saying this is what makes old school games fun, I'm going to say this is what makes a fun old school game.
Okay.
Because there are many old school dungeons where they did not follow that advice.
No, that's true.
And it just is, oh yeah, you didn't also say you looked up at the ceiling, so you instantly die.
Right.
Or just other arbitrary BS.
To be fair, those are usually, usually from some like some I'm gonna fuck these people over Gary Gygax type Tomb of Horrors module where he just wanted to
definitely Gygaxian style situation. But it is not guaranteed that old school is going to follow Derek's principles, but when it does, and it rewards engagement and all of those kind of things, that's what makes those old school style adventures that are fun, the ones you remember and are like, yeah, that was cool because we realized that these monsters were like working on like radial symmetry, and so that therefore we needed to search these other places too for secret doors or traps or something like that. You're going to always remember that you did that, instead of being like, well, we rolled a 25 and therefore we found all the traps and secret doors. You're not going to remember that.
I think that the traps conversation also brings up another point that I think you see in a lot of good dungeon design, and I would suggest people focus on too when they're making Shadowdark dungeons is that each class, especially the core 4 in Shadowdark, are specialized to do what they do. So a good example of this, Derek, is with traps. If a fighter tried to disarm a trap, it might be a DC 15 for them. And if a thief tries to do it, they just do it because it just works, because that's their specialty. So I would suggest putting in things that would utilize the unique abilities of each of the core 4 classes, which is fighter, wizard, thief, and priest, so that not one person playing that dungeon can just like go through everything, or one PC can just take care of everything on their own. You want to make sure that everyone who's playing a thief has a thing they can do, has their moment to be in the spotlight. The fighter has, their moment to be in the spotlight. Like, opening doors, door D&D is a big thing, right? So you wouldn't have to be this obvious, but, you could have a door that is mechanically locked that the thief could easily pick. You could have a door that's magically locked that the wizard would want to do. You have a door that there is there needs to be some vow made by a holy person to open, and that's your wizard. And then or your
priest.
Your priest.
And then what am I missing?
You're missing the stuck door that the fighter needs to just kick down.
Exactly. So, you don't have to be that obvious about it, but I think that is part of good dungeon design too.
Absolutely.
giving, of course, as someone who's writing it, you don't know what class and all of that stuff everyone's going to be, but you can design it assuming that there's going to be a variety, I guess.
So Jimmy asked a great question. He says, kinda, and if the party doesn't have that class. Well, Jimmy, this is the beautiful thing about having ideal solutions, but then being open to a variety of solutions. So for example, let's say that there's a door and it's stuck. And, you know, it's not a question of the lock. It's just a question of it being stuck. And you don't have the strong burly fighter in your group. And you're like, damn it, how are we going to get through the stock? Well, maybe the thief works to start dismantling the hinges, and it takes longer, or maybe it's a little bit more awkward, or maybe the wizard uses one of their fire spells and slowly smolders the door down and burns it down. It's not the ideal solution, but it is a solution. And so I think it's important to not, you know, put in single answer solutions, not only because I think those are lame, but also because you're right. Somebody may not have that exact set of skill sets. But this is why I always bring up this point that when from the Dragon magazine from the 90s, and Ray Winiger, his rule of Dungeon Craft, said the best adventures challenge the player characters and the players. And so if your dungeon is challenging the players, the actual people playing the game, but we also play RPGs because we like our characters and we want to use those mechanics. So if you could use both of them, and sometimes the players solve things with dice rolls and they use them with the abilities that are on their character sheet, that feels cool. But sometimes it's also fun to be like, our character sheet isn't going to solve this problem. We have to solve this problem. And I think if you could do both of those in the same adventure, you have an all-time classic.
And I think another thing that is, if someone is new to writing old school style adventures and who's just maybe done their own in 5e or whatever, is in old school style adventures in Shadowdark, random encounters are also more prevalent in sort of a bigger part of a dungeon too. So that's that's another challenge for you. Is, you know, maybe if you have your Battlezoo, your big bad Battlezoo monster, you have your map, you have your theme, is picking out like what those random encounters are going to be. And of course, they don't all have to be more monsters. They can be, environmental hazards or something else happens. Or you could even put your traps behind random encounters too, and not have them specifically attached to, a certain tile in a certain room. So I think that is a challenge, like I said, if you're new to Shadowdark, but it's one that I hope people are excited for.
Another change to Shadowdark that might be different from what you're thinking is Shadowdark has morale rules. So by default, creatures, when reduced to half their number or half their hit points, in the case of like a big scary single creature, basically run away or make a check if they quote unquote see if they run away. And this is very different. Not everything fights to the death. So when you fight that group of 12 goblins and the wizard throws off a magic barrage of missiles and one or two are taken down and the thief backstabs somebody and suddenly the goblins are like, oh crap, we're overwhelmed. They're going to run away. And so that is a very different, experience. You need to think about what are the implications of that. That can send your whole dungeon into a whole spiral of situations. And yes, sometimes it does cascade into a series of messy events. But that's kind of why we play different games, because different games are different.
Oh, this is great. Just have you guys talk the whole time. I don't need to do anything, especially once we have Derek on. I'm like, oh yeah, Derek, you can just keep talking. By the way, that would be great if someone doesn't play Shadowdark and then enters and wins. I always think there was this guy
that'd be sweet
who won he's like the World Series greatest
the
Scrabble player, right? The guy who literally went to France, memorized the French dictionary, and won
doesn't speak French.
Right. He won the French Scrabble tournament and he doesn't speak a word of French.
That's awesome.
I'm like,
well, I guess he speaks individual words of French now, but just not.
No, he doesn't know.
He doesn't.
No, he memorized the dictionary and then it's
now that he's memorized the dictionary, he can speak a lot of individual words of French.
He can't
they
speak
just won't be coherent.
Well, yeah, but also he doesn't necessarily know what the words even mean.
Yeah, he
exactly.
Right.
I didn't
know how to pronounce
what
them.
they mean.
Yeah, he didn't know anything. He just memorized it. I was like, it's insane. I was like,
at that point, I'm like, why didn't you just learn French? It sounds like that would have been easier.
Well, have you ever seen what's the name? There's a documentary on Scrabble. It's a book. I've talked about it in the past, and it's about this guy who decides to learn and enter like Scrabble world tournaments, and he sits down with the masters to figure out like, what do you need to do? And it's all about memorizing these word lists. And he gets really good. Like he had to memorize, all this 2-letter words, which then, and there's a lot, and then the 3-letter words, and then the 4-letter, and it kept going. And it was like quite a while. But yeah, it's what's that called? Word Freaks, I think it's the name of the book. It's really good if you want to. And there was some documentaries that came out.
What would be
right
interesting, which you can't do, but it'd be interesting to do a study to, let's say, I don't know how long it's been around. Let's just say 10 years ago. What was the average American's IQ of 5-letter words? And then ask what the average American's IQ of 5-letter words are today because of Wordle.
Oh, funny. I was like, did it go up or did it went down?
I'm saying like now everybody's like, I couldn't tell you a single 4-letter word or a 6-letter word, but by God, I know all the 5-letter words.
Person on planet Earth except me plays, or everyone plays Wordle. Everyone.
I don't play Wordle.
I don't play Wordle either. I used to, but yeah.
The only word puzzles I do are crosswords.
I do like crosswords. I will say I spend so much time like using my brain during the day that it's like I kind of need to relax, and to me Wordle's not relaxing. It's like more work to me. So
speaking of puzzles, I would be careful about using puzzles in your dungeon. I think they're cool, but a lot of people hate them.
A lot of people hate
just
dungeons.
The space you have in a Shadowdark dungeon is rarely going to allow you to include a puzzle.
Well, not only that, there's always do you use the meta knowledge did you know or versus your character not? Like that's always a problem because
in an OSR style dungeon or a Shadowdark dungeon, you're not going to just have the players roll a bunch of checks for things.
Correct.
It tends to have the players figuring things out, and that actually makes it harder to fit, ironically, in the Shadowdark length, because a puzzle that was not really a puzzle but just like, oh, I guess your character's rolling an int, that you could fit. It doesn't take that many words, but it's super boring too.
Okay, but
if you actually needed to write the entire puzzle in there, that would use so much of your space.
To be devil's advocate, why is it satisfying and okay for a fighter to describe how they grit their teeth and then they put their shoulder into the ancient rusted door and give it 2 quick thrusts, and then the GM says, sounds great, make a strength check, and everybody is totally on board with that. But then when there's some ancient runic puzzle with several missing glyphs, and the wizard says, I push the spectacles up onto the bridge of my nose and begin studying over the runes very carefully. And then the GM says, make an intelligence check. And the wizard rolls. Why is that suddenly so much less satisfying / okay?
Who said it's not?
Some people, a lot of people.
Well, I mean, I just said that.
Mark just said it was. Mark said it was not okay.
Said that in the OSR style, it's generally considered to be a boring thing to do, even though you might see it more often in a modern.
Right. I don't close the door and put a 50-pound sandbag behind it, and then I say, okay, Mark, let's see if you can shoulder this son bitch. If you can't, your character can't. Sorry.
So the reason why is that some games have, and we just got to talk about this before. Even you talked about it, Derek, challenging the players.
Right.
OSR style games want to challenge the players. You cannot challenge the players with a sandbag on a door unless maybe you can.
You could.
Maybe some people would like to do that. And they would really like, yeah, Derek set up his house of horrors and it has real traps. They don't actually hurt you. It just like kind of harmlessly does a jump scare where it blows air at you instead of shooting a spear. But he set up a trap filled real house and you're going to have to go through it. Maybe some people would like to do that. But generally, when you're talking about challenging the players sometimes and challenging their characters other times, the idea is that they challenge the players whenever they can, which is generally for thought-based tasks. And then they challenge the characters whenever they can't challenge the players, because I don't know about you, but I don't have like a real dragon that I can unleash on my players to see if they can dodge out of the way of its fire breath and stab it in the throat.
You know,
I've got a pit ball for Foster, but you heard it here first, folks. Shadowdark Care-Op meta. Make sure your strength and dex are really high because you're going to make those checks. But int, whiz, and charisma, those ones you can just describe.
You know, Derek, I think I take issue with your comparison there between the fighter and solving puzzles.
Okay.
Oh boy.
Okay, let's go.
Fight.
I think you're oversimplifying how you would even handle a fighter opening a door, because the first thing they do isn't oh, I see a door, I'm going to open it. Whoa, roll me a strength check. It is, okay, I see a door. I'm going to like jiggle the handle. I'm going to like see what's going on, right? Oh, it's unlocked, but it won't open, right? So at that point, the fighter might say, I'm going to try to like pry this thing out. And, personally as a GM, I might say, that's not working. So they might say, okay, then I'm going to investigate this door. Like, why is it doing this way? Like, oh, because the hinges are on the other side and you're supposed to push. I don't know. That's a stupid example, but
sure. Hey, well, the fighter has a low int, so maybe they didn't notice.
And if they can't pull it open, someone else, or if they fail that check to pull it open, someone else might look at and want to investigate the door. Maybe it's the thief to kind of look for another clue that could help them then open the door. And I think that you would handle a puzzle that has stumped your players in the same way. I don't think that it would be like, well, you guys can't solve it, so just roll an int check for me, and it works. You would say, or you might encourage a thief or someone else to, hey guys, like, you might want to look around the room. You might want to do this. And because in Shadowdark,
right,
people generally, find things if they're like, oh, I'm gonna search the west wall. It's like, okay, there's a tapestry there, and like, below it, there's like an etching, and you can check that out. And that's another clue that would help the players to solve the puzzle. So as a GM, I think it's up to you, if your players aren't just immediately getting it, to kind of like help lead them to those clues that would help put the puzzle together for them.
Yeah, I mean, I generally speaking, I do agree with that. Yeah. I'm just simply saying that there's a certain percentage of people who would find that at the end of the day, if the fighter just tries to just use their PC to kick open the door, after trying insufficiently, I think a lot of people would feel very comfortable making a strength check. But I think there is a good percentage of people who would go, no, you have to solve the puzzle. And it's like, well, you do get into the kind of priced into this situation. I also see it mostly, honestly, with social situations as well. And this is the classic example of like, I can have a strong fighter, even though I'm not a strong person, but it's weird sometimes in many games, the way that people run them, have a charismatic character, even though I myself am not charismatic.
So I think the social one is a completely different discussion, which you and I have probably already even had on this channel before. Whereas your description of opening the door with the fighter, you even said, I get wound up and I put some grease into it, I kick it up.
I'm not just spamming mechanics at it.
If you do that instead of just say strength 18, you've already done enough that you have satisfied most of the people who want some description of role play from role playing. If you do the equivalent when you're doing a scene, if you're talking about there's some games obviously where you have to role play everything and there are no mechanics for interactions, and that is common in OSR. But even in new school games, you generally do have a role, but you're not supposed to just roll and be like, okay, we want the king to give us a bunch of money, 24. You're supposed to, okay, well, why is the king giving you money? What are you asking for the money for? Like, give any kind of description of what your overall tactic is, even if you don't have to role play it in character or say anything from the perspective of your character. You could at least be like, okay, we want the money to fight against the undead Lich King because the Lich King is going to be attacking this kingdom. And if we had the money, we'll be able to fight him. All right, great, roll 24. Right. Okay, that's enough. And that's the equivalent of your example that you gave about bashing down the door, where you had the fighter somewhat describe how they were bashing it down.
I think the problem that is actually more pronounced when it's done in the opposite fashion, where you have a character, let's say me, somebody who is reasonably okay with talking, and I'm talking to the GM. And I give a very well-argued point of view. Maybe I even do it in character with a cool, dramatic whisper voice, so that it's like I'm playing on some actual play.
You talk to me like that,
right? And my king, do you not see the danger? It is logical that you should aid us. Your enemies are our enemies. And I lay out this whole thing, but my character has a 6 charisma, right? And so like that's where you get into this really. Because then it's like, well, he's role-playing bad. Okay, so do you just say it doesn't work? Like, where does the mechanic start and the GM no start end?
I think this goes back to like specialization with characters, because if you allow someone with a charisma of 6 to do a thing very easily, in a social interaction, what's the point of having a charisma?
Yeah.
So I think there's like you gotta put the kibosh on that sometime.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, one thing I might do is be like, yeah, I'll be all right, roll it, because after you gave that great thing with your charisma 6 character, maybe you rolled a natural 19 and it was actually in Shadowdark that would be like a 17 because you don't have any other modifiers. That's still pretty good in Shadowdark, and so maybe that's fine. But I'll sometimes be like, okay, roll it, and then let's say Derek, you rolled a 2, so it was like a -1 or a 0 in this case with your 6. It would be a 0. I'd be like, okay, so in Derek's head,
yes,
he sounded exactly like that, and he was the greatest of all time. But what he actually said to the king is, "Hey, you regal pile of garbage sitting on that throne, get your ass off there and give us some cash. We need it to fight your stuff for you because your kingdom is so weak."
Right.
Or, something like that.
No, it's that's totally true. Like there was this one time that somebody was playing, like I was playing a high intelligence wizard, and I was like really doing a horrible job at like solving this puzzle. Like me, Derek, personally, like the player, like the GM was like, he like gave us handouts, it was like very much a player puzzle. And then somebody else was playing a half orc, and they were completely crushing the puzzle because they're way better at it than me, like in real life. And then we just joked and we said, all right, you're playing my character and I'm playing your character. Like I'm to the one who's like making terrible suggestions and doesn't know what they're doing, and you're actually being the wizard who's smart and actually putting this together.
For puzzles specifically, that is a suggested tip. That is like a professionally suggested tip, is that if you have one character in the group who is like the super genius with some intelligence score that no human being can even normally possibly have because they found a magic item that increased it above normal human maximums or something like that, right? Obviously, no one person at your table is that smart, but maybe the hive mind of everyone at your table is that smart.
Right.
So it totally makes sense that you could, and especially if the person who's playing that character is actually terrible at intelligence-based tasks, you just be like, yeah, you know what? We'll all kind of contribute and give ideas, and the wizard did it.
Yeah. I think you see that a lot outside of puzzles too. I mean, at least at my table, all the time it happens where maybe one or two people sneak off, the party is split, and they have an encounter, maybe it's a social encounter, where the other players at the table are like, oh man, like, well, what if you said this? Where they're kind of like having a group discussion before the character actually, does it or whatever.
Yeah, and that can help the reverse to the Derek who's schmoozing in real life with 6 charisma, where you have the very shy player with 18 charisma. Other people can give some pointers or ideas if that player is worried about like what kind of stuff to say.
Well, and I also think, and I don't know, I haven't really thought about if this affects dungeon design yet or before, but in Shadowdark, one of the main tenets of the game is staying in turn order, which is around the table, like when you're inside and outside of combat. So when you're talking about shy players who might not be used to taking the spotlight or having a turn in the spotlight, that's a way that the game gets those type of players more involved, because it's okay, Mark, it's your turn, what are you doing, rather than just kind of the free form 5e style that I think a lot of people are used to.
Yeah, that's true. That reminded me of, I came up with a very simple house rule for if you have the 3 players in Shadowdark, which I have played with 3 players before, for easy, medium, and hard mode. So easy mode is the thief sits clockwise of the GM by 1 space. Medium mode, the thief sits across from the GM. Hard mode, the thief sits counterclockwise from the GM by 1 space. It's a simple, easy, medium, and hard mode.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Yeah,
because of the fact that the only thing that actually matters is who rolled the highest initiative, and then it goes clockwise, including the GM. So if your thief, which in my table was the case, is sitting right by the GM on that side, they can just screw you over by a lot. Like if the GM rolls a 3 and you roll like an 18 and you were like next after the GM, but your thief rolls a 19, way worse for the party. So it's actually hard mode is put the thief right next to the GM, so that the GM would go second if the thief goes first.
It sounds like your table is into power gaming here. Because who said the thief is the one with the highest dexterity? You know, I might have my.
It was the pre-generated characters from Shadowdark, and the thief had almost no hit points. It was definitely not a power game character, but did have the highest dexterity.
That's good stuff.
Yeah, it was very
yes,
funny. It was just always like, if this thief just hadn't been here, we would have gotten to actually take more turns.
My house rule with initiative is if it's a natural 20, the player who rolled it gets to decide that they can either go first normally or we go counterclockwise. So if
That's fun.
If they're the right, then it can they can go counterclockwise for that round.
I like that. Actually, I think that next time I run Shadowdark, I'm going to use that period.
Yeah.
Not just for a natural 20, but whoever wins initiative decides which direction it goes. Because that seems cool because of the fact that just
keeps
gives you
gives
you a little advantage. Yeah, it keeps you on your toes, so you're not always last if you happen to be sitting in one spot that is like far away from the person who has the higher modifier, or not always, but you're not often last. And the GM gets to decide if their monsters win. It's like, well, yeah, our undead don't really want to deal with that cleric, so maybe the cleric, we're going in this direction.
Yeah.
Yeah, very cool.
So we only have a few minutes left. If you have any other more questions, but don't worry, we're going to have more of these. Where's everyone going to be? Are you going to be? I'm not going to be at Origins, but we will be at Gen Con. Derek's going to be at Origins. Michael,
and Gen Con.
And Gen Con.
And apparently PAX.
Well, let's talk about that afterwards.
Theoretically.
Yeah, you and I should talk about that.
Well, no, I gotta go play racquetball. But yeah, we can talk about later.
Talk later. Yeah, I think I might be doing PAX West, Mark. You don't have to go. Derek and I will handle it, but I think we're going to go do PAX West.
To be fair, I'm being strong-armed into it, but you know,
it's going to be fun.
I owe Stevens for things. So.
No, it's going to be fun, and we'll get to actually see the warehouse. I've never seen my warehouse.
There you go. Oh, you're going to take my advice and go to the warehouse?
Yeah, well,
That's what I suggested to Steven when he was thinking about PAX West.
He's like, oh, my warehouse guy's like, everyone does that. I'm like, okay, it's very common. I was
okay, fair enough. Well, it was an obvious suggestion, but I did suggest it to him when he was telling me about maybe doing PAX West.
You go to the warehouse, pick up the stuff, drive it to the con, and then bring it back, and we'll ship it if there's not that much. So then we can take also exactly what we want. I can tell him what I need ahead of time, so we'll just have it all ready to go. So, but yeah, we'll be going to that. We'll be going to PAX Unplugged.
So did they give you a PAX Unplugged slot for ready to go to PAX West?
No. We're on the waiting list. But
okay.
I know, I'm actually kind of pissed. I was like, what? But, you know, I'll ask around. I probably can share a booth with someone if worse comes to worse. But, I mean, I'm on the list, so we'll see. So that's the other reason I decided to go to PAX West, because I'm like, well, can't get Unplugged. At least do PAX West, or maybe I will do what they used to do at Gen Con. At E3. At E3, they used to run out of booth space, so they would set up these competitors, and like people would like buy a parking lot and then set up booths in the parking lot, and it was so ghetto. And I was like, okay, that's a pretty good idea. I might actually have to do that. Is have like the illegal booth space like somewhere outside PAX.
Just out of the back of your car.
Yeah, I'm out of it. You know, you got like a cardboard sign. It's just like hot deals, you know, and like you're just pedaling out. Real quick, it reminds me during COVID, my photography business got shut down, and so I started selling magic cards. And there was a guy I knew who was like buying all these magic cards, but he was like, my wife can't find out, so he's like paying me like a couple $100 a week so that his wife wouldn't notice that I spent all my magic cards. But we would meet up. And, you know, everything was closed. It was COVID. So we'd meet up in a parking lot, and like on the hood of my car, we'd like
he'd meet up with his dealer.
He'd meet up with his dealer.
Yeah.
And he'd be like, you know, do you have the stuff? And I'd be like, well, I got some good choices today. I brought over some new binders, and we'd have it all laid out. And this one time, this cop rolls by like wide eyed at what's happening. And he just sees it's a bunch of cards, and he's just, you know, kind of like rolls his eyes and keeps going on. But every time we met up, I felt like I was doing something illicit or illegal, but I was really just selling magic cards. But yeah.
Which is illicit and illegal, by the way.
You're going to be at Gen Con?
I'll be at Gen Con. I'll be at Origins. I'll also be an OSR focused con in Northampton, Massachusetts, the second weekend of November, which is
What's
called
that one?
Arcane Con.
What's it
It's
called?
only their second year, but the other, like I spoke to Yohai from Cairn, and he said he just did gangbusters with a booth there last year.
Really? What's it called? I'll go. I mean, that's
yeah.
right near me, so that's easy.
I mean, it's the top billing thing is Old School Essentials, Cairn, Shadowdark, Mork or Cyborg, Morkborg, Magic, Old School Magic, Necromunda. Oh, sick! Classic Traveler.
Wait, what's
Dungeon
it called?
Crawler.
The con?
Arcane Con, like Arcane Library, but a con.
Oh
Also,
my
it's
God.
apparently sponsored.
They got it before she could do it. She's like, "Oh, we'll take the word." Aha! Now we got it.
It is sponsored by our Arcane Library,
No,
though.
of
So
course it is. Of course.
So
it
there
is.
was a good question maybe to round us out in chat about for these dungeons, what is like the age rating of the dungeons in terms of like
I mean,
how explicit
PG-13,
the stuff is?
right?
Because
PG-13.
D&D 5th edition is basically PG-13. It says 13 plus.
Well,
That's
don't
what
know.
I
What's
assume for
Shadowdark?
Shadowdark.
Oh, actually,
dungeons
that's
as
true.
well.
I don't know.
I don't
Yeah,
know
does
either.
Shadowdark get a little graphic at all? Yeah, I know some old school games can get
the
a little
rules
like
of Shadowdark didn't have anything that was that like over the top edgelordy in it that I remember.
It's pretty PG-13. It's PG to PG-13.
Yeah, I mean, I know there's like a bunch of like, like libraries that are running Shadowdark campaigns now. There's a bunch of like, kids groups that are running Shadowdark campaigns. I don't think that it's PG plus even, like, when it does talk about, oh, this thing's going to suck your blood, it's not like it's going into graphic detail or anything like that.
mhm.
But it could.
Yeah, it's not like a Pathfinder. It's not like a
Open
Pathfinder. It's not like a Pathfinder game where you're vomiting forth a swarm of maggots and death into somebody's mouth and then watching them as they explode from the inside and you turn your guts into ropes that you used to strangle somebody.
Hey, man.
Those are all Pathfinder 2 spells, by the
Those
way.
are
know.
real Pathfinder spells.
And then we were just playing and we had it was like a putrid, or it was like a corruption demon. It was something disgusting, and it actually kept, that's what it was doing. It wasn't a breath spell, it was a vomit spray, and it kept vomiting on them. And I had it coming out the other end, and they did not enjoy that at all. And there was 4 of them, and they kept doing it. And boy, is that a memorable. Yeah, it was disgusting. And it was a fight in sewage on top of it. And a level
Right.
20. So these
Sounds
were
like the Shadow of the Demon Lord spell that everyone remembers the name of, Hateful Defecation.
no, this was not. No, this was just a monster, and this was just one of its abilities. This wasn't
Thus
even
proving
spell.
that you and all your friends could be in their 50s and still act like a bunch of 15-year-olds.
We loved
There you
it.
go.
I'm the one who did that.
it's totally pooping on you. Poop's funny.
Well, that's what we said. I said, "What is it?" I says, "Remember the poop demon from Dogma? That's what you're fighting." And they're like, "Okay," and they knew exactly what I was talking about.
So wait, Derek, you're saying that's classic
Dogma
15.
tomorrow.
What's that?
I'm going to a Dogma screening tomorrow.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, right, they're doing
releasing
The 25th
Have you seen that movie,
anniversary?
Michael?
I never have.
It
Oh,
is
it's great.
not good. It's not a good movie.
Oh, like Dogma?
Yeah.
I love that movie.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I love it way more than I love Dogma more than Chasing Amy, and I love Dogma more than
I love
I've seen
Chasing-
Dogma,
I
and
love
Michael
Chasing
hasn't.
Amy.
This is the first time I've ever seen something that one of the other guests hasn't seen.
I love Dogma.
Oh, except Dragonheart, which Steven hadn't seen.
Dogma.
Dogma's good. It's
I
better
did
than
not like Dogma very much.
I
but-
like
didn't
Dogma.
like it.
I like
I don't
Dogma
like
better
it.
than, well, obviously I think Clerks is the best, but I like Dogma better than Clerks 2. I like it better than Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back. I like it better than all the View Askew. I like it better than Chasing Amy. The only ones I put above
Chasing
Dogma
Amy's my favorite.
are like probably, well, Mallrats, because it was the one I saw first and I have like a deep abiding love for that movie. And then Clerks. But I think the other ones, I think like I'm forgetting one. There's another one in
Well,
there.
there's Clerks 2, there's
Which
Clerks
was terrible.
3.
Oh, I didn't even know they made that one.
Oh,
So there
Clerks
you go.
3 is pretty, it's not good, but it's really interesting because Clerks
Anyways,
3
Don't listen to him, Michael. Dogma's great.
I'm
in
looking forward to it, man.
Dogma is very heavy-handed.
Very
Very,
good.
very heavy-handed.
Very
But George Carlin, he's the best part of that.
Of course. Well, I mean,
And-
there's a lot of
He was ahead of its time because then they had like Jesus, like with the big thumbs up. I was like,
It's
yep.
Buddy
Yeah,
Christ.
and then they did
Buddy
the
Christ.
anime girl Jesus.
Oh.
And it was for the same thing. So they posted and he was like, this is just what we were doing with Buddy Jesus.
Yeah,
and
they
Dogma.
were very ahead of their time. Like there was a lot of stuff ahead of its time when you watch that movie. You're like, now you watch and you're like, I don't see the joke. And you're like back then, you're like, oh, it's so funny. You're like, now you're like, there is no Clerks 3. Yeah, there is. Clerks 3. It's actually, I kind of like Clerks 3. It's about him. It's about him having a heart attack, and then he decides to make a movie of what they're doing, and it's very meta. It's of them making Clerks 1. So Clerks 3 is him making Clerks 1 within the Clerks universe.
Oh, that's actually super meta. That's actually kind of cool.
It's so meta. It's actually
I might
you might have to watch it just to see
I might
that.
actually enjoy that.
And then they get all the actors from Clerks 1 into Clerks 3. And let me tell you, a lot of them are so old now. You're like, wait, that's the same actor? Like you're a little horrified by some of these people because some of them did not age well. I'll leave it at that. And remember, most of them were not professional actors, so they really didn't age well. But they're all in it. So yeah. Clerks 3, I like.
And people say I'm the harsh critic. This guy's over here shitting on people for aging over the last 30 years. He's like, they're fucking old. I can't even believe it.
No. But you know what? But if I am on all those threads on Facebook that shows you this is what 50 looked like in the 80s. This is what 50 looks like now. This is why Gen X doesn't trust anything. And it's true because they show like the cast of Golden Girls, which was like all in their 30s and 40s, you know, and they're supposed to be like ancient, or like Archie Bunker, who looks like he's 100, was like 38 or something.
Well, you know, Botox and filler. I mean,
no,
they exist.
They figured it out. It's actually very simple. You know what it all comes down to? One thing, really.
Nutrition?
One thing.
Not smoking.
Two things.
Not smoking, nutrition. Yeah.
And water.
Sure.
Drinking as much, because people now drink, like no one drank water. Like water was not a thing back then. Like it was sort of like, just, you didn't do it. There was like bottled water was like, it turned into a big thing like in the 80s and 90s, and drinking water, and so many people drink so much water now, it actually really reduces your aging, like a lot. And that's a big part of it. Also smoking, because everyone smoked back then. And just being around the smoke, like, aged you horribly.
Right. Speaking of exercise and fitness,
racquetball.
It's racquetball time.
Racquetball, moisturization, and sunscreen. Yeah, that helped too. But no, seriously, look at some of these things. They showed Salma Hayek. She's 58. Like, she looks like they showed pictures of her. Like 28.
A lot of water. She's been drinking a lot of water.
Yeah, but that's the thing. It's not like these are Hollywood. Like they show Hollywood stars when they're in their 30s, 40s, and 50s. Like what's it? The guy from Cocoon. You know, Walter Grimley, whatever his name, and he looks ancient in that movie. He's 50. He looks like
sure.
Yeah, he looks like he's 100 in that movie. And then they compare him to like, Tom Cruise, who's like 60. You know, I mean, it's like, come on, really? And Tom Cruise is like topless in all of his movies and running around, and he does look a little old. He's starting to get a little old there, but you know, he's still not doesn't look like your average 60-year-old. Leave it at that. So,
all right, everyone.
Good stream, guys.
Yeah.
Until next time. If you want to see Derek being late for racquetball because Steven is going to talk about a movie for longer,
he's
you have to roll for combat.
3 minutes late. He can live.